Right, thank you, Glenn. So this came about because early warnings, it's so simple in theory, and then people do stuff. So what am I going to talk about? Well, the aims of this is you identify practical guidelines, provide insight into the process more effectively with respect to early warnings coming up through the supply chain, although actually I want you to do a bit of work on that, but also some top-down risk management tools. And the agenda of the running orders, well, you can see it down there. I won't waste time going through it. You can read it. So, first of all, bad practice. So, here's some bad practice which I've observed. Wonder if any of these ring true for you. So, one is a KPI on the number of early warnings given in a contract. That sounds, wow. Right, so are we encouraging them? No, actually it's where the contractor scored poorly the more they gave. So here we have a contractual obligation, give early warnings, but if you give them, we'll score you badly. No early warnings given by the contractor, presumably out of ignorance, not being aware of it. But hey, the contractor's not alone there. Also by the project manager. So I reviewed once a £500 million contract which had turned into 750 million. The project manager had only given 2 early warnings. And both of those, curiously, were because he hadn't accepted the latest programme, so he was notifying as an early warning the contractor that there wasn't an accepted programme. Wonder why that went up. I can't imagine that. And let's face it as well, subcontractors as well. Some more early warnings only given by the contractor prior to giving a notice of a notification of a compensation event. So we're just softening up the blow. You know what's coming next, but we'll just give that just to early warn you of a compensation event. Early warnings only given when we are in the problem, as in they're not really warnings and they're not given early. They might comply with the specific wording, as we will see, but they're not proactively given. Project manager rejects an early warning. There is nothing in the contract which allows the project manager to reject or not accept an early warning. And the reason is because it's already happened and therefore not a risk, and that relates to, we'll see on my next slide. So all of this is bad, okay? Don't think it's good if you come away from this. So first of all, related to that last point, a general note. In NEC 4, the word risk has disappeared completely from the early warning clauses. It's matters now. And hopefully as a result of that, the confusion with risk management techniques will disappear. That's not to say there's not an interplay, which we'll look at later on, but the confusion with risk management will start to disappear, or is. So let's look at what the contract says. So you can read that, and hopefully for most of you that's pretty familiar. So what are the issues around here? Well, I could mention at the bottom, what about the client's cost? Well, I can't either give any early warning for anything which might affect the client's costs, but I won't mention that. I won't mention, what about opportunities? These are all negatives. Risk management literature, if you want it, always talks about opportunities as well. And I was reviewing a contract a couple of weeks ago, and they changed the wording in all those clauses to change. So change the prices, change completion, and so on, okay? But I'm not going to mention that. What I will talk about is, what about the supervisor? Because often the supervisor is the eyes and ears of the project manager out on site. And therefore, wouldn't it make sense that the supervisor could also give early warnings? So, practical thing number 1 is delegate to the supervisor the power to notify early warnings. And this assumes there's one supervisor, but obviously further delegate down if it's a bigger site. And if you're delegating to the supervisor the power to notify early warnings because they're out on site, wouldn't it make sense that when you have an early warning meeting out on site, they can agree the actions? Rather than go, I'm sorry, I've got to go off and get a project management in. And if they can agree actions at an early warning meeting, wouldn't it make sense that they can actually instruct minor changes as a result? So if we go through a scenario, I'm out on site, we were looking at the line of our services, we spotted a service clash before the hole was dug. So let's move the services we're putting in a metre that way, the manhole, and we avoid the service clash. We agree that. Yeah, but the scope says I've got to do a bit of there. No, it doesn't now because I've changed it, yeah. Does that all make sense? Okay. So that's the practical thing number one, and other minor things as well. Going back to this clause here. This is an issue I have with it, and I can see why the panel originally wrote it, but it's these words here. Any matter which could, howsoever improbable or unlikely, howsoever small. So we're a contractor. My God, we're running short on screws for the formwork. Let's give an early warning. Well, yeah, but there's a B&Q next door. Just go and get some screws from there. Oh, yeah, but the contract says we've got to give an early warning. Because the words say however small, however improbable it is. Right? So project managers in the room, put your hands in the air like you just don't care. Project managers? Project manager, come on, we've got some, yeah, you don't be afraid. Do you really want contractors giving early warnings for things like that? Well, not ideally. Contractors with your subcontractors, do you want your subcontractors, your formwork contractor giving you early warnings? No, you just get on and solve it, yeah? So, practical thing number two, agree up front some common sense guidelines for notifying early warnings, because otherwise the system's going to be deluged, yeah? And you won't be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, the wood from the trees, etc. So here are mine. For example, I'm not saying they're gospel. If the contractor thinks it can deal with the matter itself and it won't affect the prices, the completion date, the key date, or it pot wheel, right? What does it pot wheel stand for? Impair the performance of the works in use. Come on, Richard, you're in the acronyms, right? Okay, just deal with it. Yeah, I don't need to know. And the opposite of that is notify once you think it will. Yeah, okay. But also, if the contractor thinks the project manager, supervisor, client, or other can help it deal with the matter so that it won't affect the prices, the completion date, the key date, or it pot with you, then early warn, okay? I only came up with that on the train coming in, okay? But also, exercise common sense in the above. So you can agree these things, yeah? But hang on, I've got £1 million contract, there's a potential £500,000 event, shall we say, but it's got a 1 in 10 likelihood. If you're a project manager, would you still want to know about that? Yeah, so even though you've got these guidelines, exercise common sense. And the other thing is, as a project manager, if the contractor is showing willing, be forgiving, because there might be somewhere you go, oh, you could have notified an early warning earlier. Yes, but we thought we could deal with it ourselves. And if you slam in on the sanction for a reduced assessment of a compensation event, then guess what's going to happen next? They're going to start giving early warnings for every single thing they can. All right? So that's practical thing number two. Number three is phrase early warnings nicely. All right? Now, to quote one commercial manager, he said, when we have a weekly early warning meeting, and they come from all levels, and do they pass the test? As in, an engineer, hey, right, I'm an ex-engineer, have they phrased it? I hereby notify that you haven't done this, and it's a compensation event, yeah? Is that a constructive way to phrase an early warning? Yeah, no. So phrase them nicely. So 2 weeks ago, I was with a contractor, and they said anybody can write the early warning, but our more senior people from the junior engineers, it has to run past them, right? Just to make sure the language is a bit softer. Related to that, suggest a solution. All right? Now, you don't have to contractually, but human beings we tend to stick our head in the sand if there's just a problem and just deny that there's a problem. Psychologically, we are much more accepting that there is a problem if it comes with a solution. Right? So I know a number of contractors who, as a matter of policy, say we always try and give a solution with an early warning notification, because it just means it lands a lot nicer, a lot better. Okay? And are your pro formas phrased accordingly? Right? Or do they start with, I hereby notify that? Yeah? And is the big box for the problem with a little bit for a solution or whatever? So, going back to what the contract says, 15.2, it's almost as if I'm working through it in a logical way. Again, you can skim read through that. The new bit in NEC 4 was this, and it was the adding in of a regular early warning meeting, which was good practice, best practice in any case. The issue which I have with this is that it can imply that you should really just have regular early warnings. Right? The best sites that I observe, they have ad hoc meetings out on site where the issues are solved at the lowest possible level. Right? And that way you can get the two people there who are relevant and it's solved straight away, the work can just carry on. Yeah? Whereas if it's all held over to the regular meeting, what happens is that you get 8 people round a table who all want to add in their tuppence, and instead of a 5 minutes conversation out on site and the problem solved, it's a half-hour conversation a week later. All right? And so the more you can push the ad hoc early warnings out down to site level, the more that regular meeting becomes a monitoring meeting of, has the action been done, has the action been effective? All right? And will save a lot of more expensive people's time as a result. So what you're doing is you're effectively, there's a laser on here, isn't it? Is there? No, there isn't. You're moving I'm sure there was, because Glenn gave me one, and our cat loved it. But anyway, it moves the first bullet point is done out on site, if you like, and that regular meeting is the one at the bottom. So, practical number 5 is prioritise early warnings at the regular meeting. As in, we don't start from the bottom and go through them. So, I think this is where, in NEC 3, where it was risk reduction meetings and everything, people equated it to risk management and therefore probability and impact. All right? I think a more constructive way of looking at it is more to do with, related to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and the important and urgent matrix. So what you're looking at is a matrix something like this. All right? And Covey said what people do is we concentrate on the urgent rather than what's important. Okay? So for the urgent but low impact, resolved by ad hoc meetings out on site, there and then. Solved there and then. For the not urgent but high impact, resolved at the regular early warning meeting by the key important people, bringing in others as required for that session or whatever. For the urgent and high impact, a special meeting by the important people, if you like, or the key people, not the key persons, in italics, key people, right? And pushed down to and resolved at other regular meetings. So, it's a design issue. We have a design meeting. Task them. These early warnings are regular. It's relevant to you. This is to do with handover, or quality, or whatever. But you need to monitor to make sure they're resolved and actioned. And that almost means that at the regular early warning meeting, you're almost dividing it into 2. You're dividing into which are the ones which we need to deal with as early warnings because they're important and urgent, or not urgent. And actually the second bit is the monitoring of all the other ones and saying, are actions happening? Have they been resolved? So, bit of review here. Oh, I've got through it quicker. That's a rare thing for me. Normally I take much longer. In groups of 5-ish, so, you know, people on your road, people behind you, etc. What do you like about what I've said? What don't you like or disagree with? And that possibly leads on to the next one, is what would you refine or add as a result of that? Okay. And a bonus question for contractors is, pretty much I've been talking about contractors to project managers. What about from your supply chain, your subcontractors, who have, under the short contracts, a requirement to early warn, but also at the main, under the engineering, the full contracts, requirements to early warn, back to back, if you like. So have I said is something missing here? How does this apply at subcontract level? That sort of stuff. And if you have a 5-minute chat, and we'll get a bit of feedback on it. Okay? So it is 9:44 by my watch, so 9:49-ish. Go for it. Right? Say hello to people. Don't just start talking. Be polite. Okay? Thank you. So this is where I pick on people if we don't have any volunteers. And I'm very pleased to say that Chris Richardson is our first volunteer over there. So can we have a mic over there? Thank you, Chris.
Morning, John. You already know the question because I mentioned it to you. So one thing I would refine or add is he didn't really mention anything about designers or consultants. So in my experience and what I see out there is it's a pretty low bar in terms of risk management from designers out there at the moment. So yeah, the whole topic on that really, but how can we improve that as a group? Who in this room are potentially representing those kind of organisations? But I think it's a big topic. Yeah,
I totally agree from my experience of consultants. Oh, hang on. They're pretty appalling at giving early warnings. All right, okay. Yeah, so yeah, I totally agree with that. Someone else still. Oh, we've got a Ben. Hey, Ben. If you walk over there, that was meant to be a pun. That was appalling.
A bad one, John. Yeah. Ben Walker of Gather. Yeah, I think just picking up on your point and refining it slightly on the conflation of early warnings and compensation events. It's a really big problem because if you do that, and for instance, you price your early warning, I've seen some project managers insist that it's not a valid early warning if it doesn't have a guesstimate at what it might cost. You literally leapfrog the foresight applied collaboratively part of the process. It's supposed to explore options and proposals and actions. So try not to price your early warnings would be my refinement.
Yeah, and on the one hand, you want an is it a biggie or is it a small one? But also I've seen whenever a figure's mentioned and then it results in something more, it's like, but you said.
Exactly, and I think that closes down, presents more of a fait accompli, and you want an opening conversation, not a closing one. So I think your risk scores is a good idea, but just keep money out of it until you've had the meeting.
Yeah, okay, yes. Okay, someone else?
Morning everyone, Adam Cooper Mace. As there's no mechanism for RFIs within NEC, I've often been told that the early warning systems will be used, and this is something I'm not too sure about.
Right, okay. Well, I'll keep that, that's a question, not a, but yeah, I'll answer that at the end if we have time, or just see me, and I'll answer it. By the way, I saw one gentleman taking photos of this. If you want the slides, I'll just drop me an email, and I'll send them over to you. Okay. Okay, can we have an... Oh, yep, there's another one. Behind. All right.
We were talking about the Eisenhower matrix and thought that was really good. At the same time, sometimes when you're on, rather than an individual project, when you're on a very large programme, the way you escalate can send hairs running all over everybody's organisation, and then a whole load of noise comes back down again. I'm cautious that when we've got these large strategic level early warnings, they actually come with a briefing paper. So these aren't the small urgent ones, they're the very important non-urgent, but when they go up, they should come with a briefing paper, preferably on PowerPoint, so people who can't be bothered to read it actually see it and go through it when you have your risk reduction meeting.
Okay, yeah. I can see the danger is we have to do a full presentation before we can early warning, but...
5 slides.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay. All right, okay. I'll take note. Right, okay. And Ross, I think that is the last one we have time for.
John, I think I'm going to take exception to your suggestion you delegate the powers to the supervisor. It's a different organisation. They're holding different professional indemnities and insurance. And you're saying to the supervisor, you can change the contract, and yet the project manager is responsible for it. I would be very wary of doing that.
Okay, so I did say minor, and what I didn't mean to say is where you define what minor is. Yeah, so very definitely you set constraints on that. And the supervisor with their PI insurance would be part of that conversation if they're a separate organisation. Okay, right, I would love to get more, so do come up in the break, but I've got a few more things to say. So, here's a controversial one. Should the contractor be leading on the early warning process? Blimey. So, for example, an option A, design and build contract. So let's say I am a client and I've put together a good scope, but it's, outline design and a bit of the detail that matters, shall we say, and we have a design of a build contractor. There shouldn't be much change, but the design and build contractor has to control, let's say, 60 subcontractors, including the designers, the consultants, God bless them, and so on, all right? Surely, that contractor there is taking most of the financial risk, all right, and therefore has the motivation to do it. And secondly, they're at the centre of it. They've got 60 subcontracts coming into them and one client or a project manager coming into them. Shouldn't they? So they've got the motivation and all the responsibilities, if you like, as opposed to sort of semi-post-boxing it up to the main contract level. And there is a third reason which I've been given why the contractor should do it. And it's those consultants again. It's because the project manager's not actually doing it. Okay, was the third reason that was given to me. Now, I suggest that. I'm not saying it should happen on all contracts or anything like that. And really, I don't think, and Rob Horner, I said I'd give Rob Horner a mention here because he'd probably disagree with me because that's who he is at an identity level. I don't think you can force the contractor to do this because it's a condition of contract level, the project manager should do it, yeah? But if they agree to administrate it, shall we say, because they're at the centre of it. So that's a suggestion. And what else? Well, but there's a flaw in most of what I've said so far. So anybody spot the flaw in what I've said? No. Is Nick of N-Plan here? Yes. Nick would like this one. It's all a bit reactive, what I've talked about, as in you're in the problem, yeah? It's not really early warnings, in the true sense of the word. So, how do we deal with that? Well, let's go back to the definition of what it says. And I've circled the thing there, listed in the contract data for inclusion. So it's almost implying there's sort of two sets of lists. Well, actually, so how could this work? Well, let's say I've got a program, a big project or program, and I've got a fancy risk register in there with impacts and probabilities and all that sort of stuff, and we can generate S-curves and say P90 and P10 and P50 and things like that, and have pretty lines and things like that, and senior management will be really impressed. What we do is we draw, it's based on guesses of probability, but anyway, it's science. Right, okay. What we draw is we draw down from there the risk related to the contract, and we start our starter for 10 or 20 or whatever, and we say to the contractors, what's your more construction-related ones, yeah? Give us those. And they're referenced from contract data part 2. And often you just see them listed, but I do actually prefer simple risk registers, shall we say, okay? So you sign the contract, or the contract's put in place, and the project manager, as we all know, within 1 week, should merge them. And you get what I call a contract level early warning register. So conceptually, an Excel spreadsheet, the first tab is more akin to a traditional risk register. And you have a first early warning meeting, all right? Your regular one. And what you do is you look up and that say, oh, these risks, they're pretty high level and generic for this projects of this sort, like ground conditions. Right, okay. Well, where on this contract do we have concerns around ground conditions? Well, the northwest corner, because we couldn't get access up there before we started on site. Okay, so let's take down that rather generic risk and that rather generic response of do more site investigation. Yeah, and we say what we're going to do is we've got a digger on site, we'll dig some trial pits, then we need someone from the contractor there, we need the foundation designer there and a geotechnical person there. And what's the action? They attend it, and at the next regular meeting, they give a quick report back. And if it says it's what we hope for, great. If not, further actions. But you're taking down those really high-level generic risks, generic responses, and making them specific. And then what happens is I've got to press one more time. You have this interaction. Hopefully, it is what we expect. So we can go back up to this contract level risk register and say, actually, after we can start reduce the probability. Reduce the contingency, start reallocating it, do good risk management practice, etc. And equally, we might get further on in the project and say, at this stage, where we're starting to transition into, let's say, or commissioning phase, and there's lots of M&E stuff, does that cause problems? Getting the IT up and working and getting them, yeah? We might really start looking at focusing on those now, okay? Rather than what I see is just risk registers are just sort of abstracts. Yeah, we've done it. We've ticked the box. All right. And obviously, as things happen at that, you can then start to have another dialogue at that project level risk register. All right, and start reducing contingencies there. Other risks might emerge and feed down, etc. So there's a dialogue there. I could say probably a quarter of an hour on this slide alone, but I've got to move on. So draw down from the traditional risk registers to proactively early warn. Early warn in the true sense of the word, right? And use modern technology, i.e. big data and AI, as an aid to this, rather than relying on limited sample size, i.e. personal experience, and cognitive biases about probabilities, because there's about 140 cognitive biases which have been identified, mental shortcuts, which basically mean we are rubbish at guessing probability, right? Absolutely rubbish. There are tools out there. The link there is to a video I did specifically around early warnings and using AI and big data with NPlan. I then got a bit of the proverbial when I helped with the launch of the Oracle cloud-based contract management system, because they told me we can do that as well, right? So, there are other systems out there to look at it, but basically use it because it's going to be far better than just guesses. All right? So, summary of the practical things. Here we go. You can read it. Looking at that, is any of that rocket science apart from the AI bit? Okay. Hopefully that's useful and you can encourage people to do it. So with that, I don't think I've got time for Q&A. No. But anyway. But see me, I'll answer.